We're going to get started momentarily, just waiting for members to come over from the floor. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Capital Budget Subcommittee decisions. I want to thank everyone for their patience. Members going to be coming in momentarily. We are just got off the floor. Just to set the framework. From last year, we're about $1 billion less in capacity, but the posture of the Senate hasn't changed in terms of doing all we can. Across the state of Maryland. It might not have been as much as we have in the past, but we wanted to make sure that this budget reflects our values and the fact that we are investing in communities across the state of Maryland. And that's hopefully the product that you'll see today, and I'm confident you will. So with that, we will start going through the documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. You have 5 packets in front of you today. The white packet is the decision document. The yellow is the additional pages. The green one is the miscellaneous grant projects. The pink is the pre-authorizations, and the blue one is the LBIs. We will first move through the white packet. The analyst will present budget code wise and will direct you to the yellow packet where they have additional items for consideration, starting with D25.
On page 1, with the Interagency Commission on School Construction, the DLS recommendation was approve all general bond and revenue bond authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Okay.
On page 2 in the white packet for the Maryland Department of Disabilities, DLS recommends to approve the general obligation bond authorization for the Access Maryland program, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Okay. Any opposition?
On page 3, we have the Maryland Stadium Authority. DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
On page 4, we have the Historic St. Mary City Commission. DLS recommended adopting committee narrative regarding a report on site improvements, encumbrances, and expenditures. The agency concurred.
Second. Okay. Any opposition? All right.
On page 5, we have the Board of Public Works. The DLS recommendation was to concur with all GO bond authorizations and to adopt committee narrative requesting a report on DGS headquarters relocation and use of the 2100 Guilford Avenue property, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, is there an additional page?
We do have 2 additional actions
Okay,
in the yellow packet. On page 1, the first recommendation is to authorize 500,000 in GO bonds for repairs to the Parole Communications Tower.
Okay.
The second action is to authorize 200 on page 2, next page, authorize 250,000 in GO bonds for further repairs and renovations at the Goldstein Treasury Building.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt and adopt additional pages 1 and 2.
okay. So the motion is we're going to concur with the governor's allowance, adopt that, and then we're adopting color page 1 and 2. Any objections? Okay, thank you.
On page 6, we have the judiciary. DLS recommendation is to approve all authorizations and pre-authorizations, and the agency concurs.
To adopt.
Is there any opposition? Okay,
On page 7, Military Department, DLS recommends approving all general obligation bond authorizations, pre-authorizations, and changes to prior authorizations. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
is there any opposition?
Next page, on 8, we have Department of Veterans Affairs. DLS recommended approving the $1,112,000 in general obligation bonds for the department. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Any opposition? Okay. Adopted.
On page 9 in the Maryland Department of Planning, the DLS recommendation is to adopt the GO bond authorizations for their grant and loan programs. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 10, we have the Department of Information Technology. DLS recommended approving the general obligation bond. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Any opposition?
On page 11, we have Department of Transportation. The DLS recommended approving all general obligation bonds. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Is there any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 12 is the Department of Natural Resources. Department of Legislative Services recommended approving all the general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Is there any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 13 is the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Maryland Department of Legislative Services recommended reducing the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program authorization by $3 million, bringing it down to $5 million. The understanding is that there is $3 million in funding that's estimated to be available from fiscal 2024, which means that would then carry over and then provide for $8 million in overall spending in fiscal 2025. The agency disagreed, noting that based on the kind of their needs, that they think the full $8 million authorization is needed.
Mr. Chair, we're gonna take the governor's position and move to adopt.
Also, I just want to make note, I want to just thank Senator Jennings for his leadership on this issue. I know that the senator wants to make sure that this program is protected. So the committee is going to be working very closely with the senator. And if there's any issues in the future, we'll make sure that it gets the funding it needs. We just wanted to publicly thank Senator Jennings on his leadership here. Okay, next.
On page 14 in the Maryland Department of Health, DLS recommends approving all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Move to adopt.
Okay, any opposition? Great.
On page 15 in the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, there's two DLS recommended actions. They're connected. The first one reduces $2 million in funding in 2025, and action number 2 provides that in a pre-authorization. The agency disagreed on both of these.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject actions number 1 and 2 on page 15.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Okay, any opposition? Okay, both items have been rejected.
On page 17, for the Maryland State Library Agency, DLS recommends to approve the general obligation bond authorization for the Public Library Capital Grant Program, and the agency concurred.
Senator King, do you have a motion? Any opposition?
Thank you.
Can I just get clarification on Department of Ag? It's item LA00. Sorry, Mr. Gray. Just wanted to make sure that we were going to make the modification. I just want to make sure that was properly reflected.
So the DLS recommendation is to reduce by $3 million to $5 million authorization.
Yeah, we're going to take that. Yeah. Correct. Not the governor. We're going to take DLS. I just wanted to make sure that everybody agreed. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify any confusion. When all the praise with Senator Jennings, you know, kind of, it always happens like that, Senator Jennings, always. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Baker. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Moving to page 18. For University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, the DLS recommendation was to delete funds for the new Institute for Health Computing.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject DLS's, reject DLS and add 500,000 for a total of 2.5 million.
Any objections? Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if we could also add 500,000 for the new dental ambulatory surgery center for a total of 1.638.
Adding 500,000 for dental ambulatory surgery. Any objections? Okay.
Okay. Moving on to page 19 for University of Maryland of College Park, the recommendation was to approve all general obligation bonds authorization and pre-authorizations. However, I do have an item for your consideration. It's page 3 on your goldenrod package. And this expresses the intent of the General Assembly that the funds be only used for below market rate graduate housing and the state support graduate housing by providing $5 million annually from 2026 to 2032.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow page number 3.
Great. Senator Rhodes Pep seconded. Any opposition? Thank you very much.
On pages 20 and 21, we have Bowie State University. For items 1 and 2, DLS recommended the authorizing prior authorizations for the Thurgood Marshall Library to align with the design schedule. The agency disagrees.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject action number 1.
Okay. Any opposition? Okay. Next.
And action number 2 is the same recommendation.
And Mr. Chair, if we can reject action number 2.
Okay. Any opposition? Okay.
Page 22, Townsend University, DLS recommended for Townsend to approve the general obligation bond authorization and pre-authorizations and the prior authorizations. The agency concurred.
Adopt.
Is there any opposition? Okay.
On page 23, white pages, the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, DLS recommended for the university to approve all general obligation bond authorizations. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Is there any opposition? Okay.
On page 24, Coppin State University, DLS recommended for the university to approve all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Any opposition? Okay.
On page 25, Salisbury University, DLS recommended for the university to approve all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 26 for UMBC, the recommendation was to approve all general bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 27 for University System of Maryland office, the recommendation is approve all general bond authorizations and pre-authorizations and approve academic revenue bonds for USM, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Any opposition? Okay.
Page number 28 for Baltimore City Community College, the DLS recommendation was to approve all general obligation bond authorizations.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Any opposition? Okay.
On page 29 for St. Mary's College of Maryland, DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations. However, there's an additional item for your consideration on page 4 of the yellow packet, adding funds in fiscal 2025 for the Montgomery Hall renovation project.
Mr. Chair, can we adopt yellow page number 4?
Any opposition? Okay. Adopted.
On page 30 for the Maryland School for the Deaf, DLS recommended approving the general bond authorization and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Any opposition? Adopted.
Page number 31 for the Maryland Higher Education Commission. The DLS recommendation was to approve all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations. However, if you turn to the gold packet, there are three additional pages for consideration. The first page, beginning on page 5 and continuing on page 6, would increase the authorization for the community college construction grant program by 1.2 million in order to add funding for 2 projects.
Senator Quarterman, you have a motion? No? Great. Okay, any opposition? Great. I saw Hagerstown in there, sir, so I know.
Sorry.
Pages 7 and page number 8 add pre-authorizations. Page 7 adds pre-authorizations in fiscal 2026 for 2 projects, and page 8 adds 1 pre-authorization in fiscal 2027.
Mr. Chair, can we adopt yellow pages 7 and 8?
Any opposition? Great.
On page 32, we have Morgan State University. DLS recommended approving all general bond authorizations, pre-authorizations, and amendments to prior authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, if we can add 500,000 to the deferred maintenance and site improvement program for the Murphy Fine Arts Center roof and exterior doors replacement project.
Any opposition? Okay.
There's an additional item for your consideration on page 9 of the yellow packet. It is a committee narrative requesting a report on the Lake Clifton redevelopment plan.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow page number 9.
Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 33, this is for the University of Maryland Medical System. DLS recommends approving $20 million in GO bonds for the new Easton Regional Medical Center, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, adopt.
Is there any opposition? Okay, adopted.
Turning to page 34 for the Department of Housing and Community Development, DLS recommended reducing funding for the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative by $15 million to the mandated level. The agency disagreed.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject that disposition.
Is there a second? Any opposition? Okay.
And then
Item has been rejected.
I've got several items in the yellow packet for you, beginning on page 10. The first item, pages 10 and 11, would restrict funding within the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative for several projects shown on the page.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow pages number 10 and 11.
Is there any opposition?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any opposition? Okay, color pages 10 and 11 have been adopted.
On pages 12 and 13, this would add or would restrict funding within the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Program for specified projects.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow pages number 12 and 13.
Second.
We're a well-oiled machine here, well-oiled machine. There's been properly seconded. Is there any opposition? Okay, so color pages 12 and 13 have been adopted.
Page 14 is for the Strategic Demolition Fund. This would both restrict funding for 1 project within that program, as well as reduce the general obligation bond funds for the program by $30 million, as those have been fully funded instead using PAYGO funds.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow page number 14.
Second.
Second, any opposition? Okay, adopted.
Page 15 deletes general obligation bonds for homeownership programs, which again have been fully funded through the operating budget using PAYGO funds.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow page number 15.
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Any opposition? Okay, thank you.
Page 16 is similar. This reduces funding for rental housing programs and bonds that have been fully funded using PAYGO funds.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow page number 16.
And any opposition? It's been seconded. Any opposition? Okay. Adopted.
Turning back to your white packet on page 35, this is for the Department of Commerce. DLS recommendation was to approve the GO bond authorization for the department, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt.
It's been Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
Page 36, the Department of the Environment, the recommendation is to approve the general obligation bond authorizations for the department. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, can we adopt?
Any opposition? Okay,
Page 37 in the Maryland Environmental Service, the DLS recommendation is to approve the GEO bond authorizations for the State Water and Sewer Infrastructure Improvement Fund, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt?
any opposition? Okay, it's been adopted.
The Department of Juvenile Services appears on page 38. DLS recommended deleting the general obligation bond funding for the Maryland Youth Residence Center renovation and expansion project. The agency disagrees and requests to maintain the funding as it cannot envision a plan for its next facilities master plan that does not include access to residential treatment in Baltimore City.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject?
Is there any opposition to the rejection? Okay, we rejected.
Then turning to page 39 with the Department of State Police, DLS recommended approving all general obligation bond authorizations and pre-authorizations for the department. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt?
Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
On page 40 begins recommendations for the miscellaneous grant programs. Recommendation 1 pertaining to the Blue Line Corridor project. As indicated at the budget hearing, DLS intends to withdraw this recommendation.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject action number 1 on page 40?
Second.
Okay. Any opposition? Okay, it's been rejected.
Recommendation number 2 on page 40 and corresponding to recommendation number 7 on pages 42 and 43 pertain to the Federal Bureau of Investigation project. These 2 recommendations would defer funding and pre-authorize a portion of funding until fiscal 2026.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject action number 2 and on page 40 and reject action number 7 on page 42 or 43.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we'll be keeping in the whole 100 million for the FBI. Okay, any opposition? Okay,
All right, similarly, recommendation number 3 on page 41 and the corresponding number 8 on page 43 for the Johns Hopkins University Data Science and Computing Infrastructure Project would defer a portion of funding and pre-authorize funding to fiscal 26.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject action number 3 on page 41 and action number 8 on page 43.
Second.
it's been seconded. Any opposition? Okay, they've been rejected.
All right, recommendation number 4 on page 41 would reduce funding for the Montgomery County Recreational Facilities Playground Equipment Program.
I would move to reject that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any opposition? Okay, number 4 has been rejected.
Turning to page 42, recommendation number 5 would reduce funding for the new Robert Hunt Revitalization Center project.
Mr. Chair, if we can reject action number 5 on page 42.
Second.
Been seconded. Any opposition? Okay, it's been rejected.
For item number 6, still on page 42 for the Maryland Independent College and University Association, the DLS recommendation is to approve all general obligation bond authorizations, and the agency concurred.
Adopt.
Second.
Any, it's been seconded. Any opposition to the adoption? Okay, it's been adopted.
For the Maryland Hospital Association, starting on page 45, the first recommendation is to deauthorize funds for the Peninsula Regional Medical Center as the project is not moving forward. The agency disagrees as the project is still within the 7-year term of the grant.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt action number 1 on page 45.
Second.
Any opposition? Okay, adopted.
The second recommendation, also on page 45, is to page 45 and also on page 46, is to deauthorize funds for the Johns Hopkins Hospital Residential Crisis Treatment Center as the project is not moving forward. The agency disagreed as the project is still within the 7-year term of the grant.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt action number 2 on page 45 going to 46.
Second.
There is also an additional page on the yellow packet on page.
Before we do that, we just, is there any opposition to those two items? Okay, adopted, please continue, sorry.
On page 17 of the yellow packet, also for the Maryland Hospital Association, this action is to add 1 million for the Howard County General Hospital Behavioral Health Unit Project.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt page 7, yellow page number 17.
Any, great, it's been seconded, any opposition? Okay, it's been adopted.
On page 47, the final piece in this white decision document packet is for the local jails and detention centers capital grant program. DLS recommended to adopt committee narrative requesting additional statistics on their local jail populations, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt.
Any opposition to the adoption? Okay, it's been adopted.
Turning to your yellow packet on page 18, there are several additional items for your consideration. Pages 18 and 19, this would amend language in the capital bill that relates to the administration of miscellaneous grants. And this is just language that's intended to make that administration process easier.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow pages number 18 and 19.
Any, it's been seconded, any opposition? Great,
Okay.
adopted.
Pages 20, 21, 22, and 23 are all deauthorizations for projects that were unable to use their funding, and operating funding has been provided instead for those projects.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt yellow pages number 20, number 21, number 22, and number 23.
Second.
Is there any opposition? Okay, adopted.
Before we move forward, we would like to confirm your position on the Board of Public Works, page 5 on the white packet.
Yeah, we had adopted, we concurred with the governor's allowance. And then were there any additional pages of narrative that we have yet taken action on?
We have the committee narrative for the DGS relocation report as well.
I think the
Okay.
intent was to adopt that.
Adopt, okay.
Is there any opposition? Okay, it's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have the miscellaneous grant projects in the green sheet for your consideration.
Is there any other additions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is. I'd like to increase the amount of Ashley Addition Treatment Project and fund it at 200,000. Currently, it is at 150,000. This will be an increase of 50,000.
Thank you. Yeah, the intent was always 200,000. So thank you very much, Senator. Is there any opposition to that? Okay. Why don't we take a look at the green sheet, colleagues? If there's any questions, please let me know, or any changes, let us know. Otherwise, we would move to adopt color page, green color page.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt green, yellow, green pages, color pages 1 through 5.
Second.
It's been properly seconded. Is there any opposition? Okay, all those in favor, green, say aye. Okay, opposed, great.
Next is the additional pre-authorizations in the pink packet, pink page for your consideration.
Does anybody have any questions about the pre-authorizations? The one thing we did want to flag as a body is, you know, the pre-authorizations are sort of like a hope, but given fiscal restraints, we can't, when we pre-authorize something, it's our hope, but we can't ever guarantee that it'll be funded. But it is a marker and it is a hope. But again, given our fiscal climate, we just can't guarantee that the funding will be there. But this is a hope. Is there a motion on the on the pink page.
Mr. Chair, there is a motion to adopt pink page, color page.
Is there a second? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, adopted.
Okay, the last one is the LBI on the blue packet for your consideration.
Mr. Chair, if we can adopt blue color page 1 through 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Unanimous.
That would be all.
Is there anything else that we're missing? Okay, is there a motion to move the subcommittee report?
Mr. Chair, if we can have a motion to move the subcommittee report.
Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. We really want to thank Department of Legislative Services for their hard work. And we appreciate the subcommittee's hard work as well. And thank you everyone for being here today, and we'll see you soon. We're adjourned.